First contact. Fleet Commander Vezik stood on the command deck of the Eternal Dawn, pride of the Vasari Armada, and watched the holographic display as it rendered the unremarkable blue planet before them. His 4 eyes narrowed in contemplation, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that his subordinates recognized as impatience. This is it. This is the mysterious Earth that has been hidden behind the quantum distortion field for so long. His voice carried the aristocratic lilt of the Vasari High Command. It looks primitive. Science Officer Nella approached, her slender form bowing slightly in deference. The outer scans confirm what our long-range probes suggested, Commander. The planet shows minimal orbital infrastructure, scattered population centers, and energy signatures consistent with pre-interstellar civilization. And we are certain this is their homeworld. Vezik's crest flared slightly, a sign of skepticism among his species. The Vasari Empire had conquered 17 systems in the past cycle alone. Each conquest added to their collective knowledge, technology, and genetic pool, the cornerstone of their evolutionary philosophy. The intercepted transmissions confirm it, Commander. The humans call it Earth. Their communications suggest they've barely reached their lunar satellite. They have no defense against our technology. The tactical officer, Gran, a hulking figure with battle scars decorating his exoskeleton, projected a series of images onto the main screen. Our analysis of their military capabilities shows projectile weapons, primitive nuclear devices, and rudimentary energy shields. Nothing that could withstand even a fraction of our fleet's firepower. Vezik felt a tinge of disappointment. The Vasari stories spoke of humans as a species of interest, creatures that had mysteriously disappeared from galactic records centuries ago after brief initial contact. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others believed they had gone into hiding after glimpsing the true powers of the galaxy. Neither theory seemed to match the unimpressive world before him. Prepare the first wave, Vezik ordered, settling into his command chair. Standard subjugation protocol. I want their defensive capabilities neutralized before we begin resource extraction. The invasion fleet, comprising 5 capital ships and their support vessels, moved into formation. The Eternal Dawn would remain in high orbit to coordinate the assault while the others descended through the atmosphere. It was a strategy that had worked flawlessly across countless worlds. First wave deployed, Commander. Gran reported as the ships broke formation and began their approach to Earth. Expected resistance, minimal. Estimated time to planetary control, 6 hours. Vezik nodded, already thinking about the report he would send to the Imperial Council. Another world added to the Empire. Another species to serve the greater good of Vasari expansion. Perhaps the humans would prove useful as laborers or test subjects. Their planet seemed rich in water and organic compounds, valuable resources for the bioenergy plants back home. What happened next defied all their predictions. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 minutes after the invasion force entered Earth's upper atmosphere. The communications officer's voice rose in pitch, a clear sign of distress among their kind. Commander, we've lost contact with the Vengeance. Vezik straightened in his chair. Interference from the planet's magnetic field. Negative, sir. The ship was transmitting normally. Then, silence. No distress signal, no system failure warnings. Before Vezik could process this information, the tactical display erupted with alerts. The Vengeance, a destroyer-class vessel with a crew of 800, had simply vanished from their scanners. Full scan of that sector. Vezik ordered, his earlier complacency evaporating. What weapons did they deploy? The science officer's hands flew over her console, but her confusion was evident. That's just it, Commander. Our sensors detect no energy signatures consistent with weapons fire. No projectiles, no beams, no explosions. The ship is simply gone. Impossible. Vezik's crest fully extended in alarm. Nothing can. Sir, we've lost the Harbinger as well. Gran's voice had lost its confident edge. Same pattern, no warning, no distress call. The command deck erupted into controlled chaos as officers tried to understand what was happening. Two capital ships, each equipped with the finest technology the Vesari Empire could produce, had vanished without a trace while approaching this supposedly primitive world. "Pull back the remaining vessels," Vezek ordered, a cold feeling seeping through his exoskeleton. "Defensive positions around the Dawn. I want answers." But the retreat came too late. The remaining invasion ships began disappearing one after another, blinking out of existence on their monitors without explanation. No debris, no energy signatures, nothing that would indicate conventional warfare. "Commander," Mela's voice trembled as she studied her readings. "I'm detecting something. It's faint, but it appears to be some form of quantum distortion emanating from the planet's surface." "A weapon?" Vezek demanded. "Not like any weapon we've encountered before. It's as if space itself is being manipulated around our ships." Vezek had faced death many times during his 3-century career. He had crushed rebellions, survived ambushes, and destroyed enemies who had threatened the Empire. But never had he encountered an enemy that could make capital ships disappear without even revealing themselves. "All power to shields," he roared. "Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace." The Eternal Dawn's engines surged as the massive vessel attempted to retreat from Earth's orbit. But something was interfering with their jump calculations. The hyperspace field wouldn't stabilize. "Sir, we're detecting multiple objects approaching from the planet's surface," the tactical officer reported, his voice hollow with disbelief. "They're small, barely larger than shuttlecraft." The view screen zoomed in on one of the approaching objects. It was indeed small by Vesari standards, perhaps a 20th the size of the Dawn. Its design was unlike anything in their database, smooth, without visible weapons ports or engine exhausts. It moved with a fluid grace that defied their understanding of propulsion physics. "Scan them. What kind of weapons are they carrying?" Vezek demanded. "Sir, we can't penetrate their hulls with our sensors. But whatever they are, they're accelerating to attack speed." Vezek made a decision. Target the lead vessel. Full plasma barrage. The Eternal Dawn unleashed its primary weapons, sending lances of superheated matter toward the approaching Earth vessel. The shots connected, direct hits that should have vaporized the target instantly. Instead, the plasma seemed to flow around the small craft, dissipating harmlessly into space. "Impossible," Vezek whispered. That's when they heard it, a sound that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space or through the shielded communications of a Vesari warship. A whisper, somehow audible in the minds of every crew member simultaneously. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice was calm, almost regretful. It carried no malice, only a simple statement of fact. The science officer screamed first, clutching her head and collapsing to the deck. Others followed, their neural systems overwhelmed by something no scan could detect. Vezek felt it too, a presence inside his mind, sifting through memories, examining thoughts with the casual interest of a scholar studying an insect. "What are you doing to my crew?" Vezek demanded, though whether he spoke aloud or merely thought the words, he couldn't be sure. The answer came not in words, but in images that flooded his consciousness. He saw Earth not as it appeared now, but as it had been centuries ago. A world torn by internal conflicts, humans fighting humans with increasingly destructive technologies. He saw their wars, their suffering, their resilience. And then he saw what they had become. Humanity hadn't regressed. They had evolved, not physically, but in ways far more profound. They had turned inward, developing minds capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. They had hidden themselves away not out of fear, but for protection. The protection of other species from what they had become. "Commander," one of the few officers still conscious shouted, "3 more vessels have appeared behind us. We're surrounded." Vezek struggled to maintain his focus as the foreign presence continued to explore his mind. "Emergency protocols. Get us out of here. Any vector." The Eternal Dawn shuddered as its emergency thrusters fired, pushing the massive vessel away from Earth at maximum acceleration. The smaller human vessels did not pursue, merely maintained position, watching. "Sir, something's happening to the crew," the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. Medical reports flooding in from all decks. Hallucinations, memory loss, some kind of neural interface. Vezik knew. He could feel it himself. Something had been left behind in their minds. A seed, a presence, a message. The humans hadn't just defended their world. They had marked the invaders. "Get us back to Vazari space," he ordered, fighting to remain conscious as more of his crew succumbed around him. Maximum speed. As the eternal dawn limped away from Earth, accelerating toward the jump point that would take them back to Imperial space, Vezik looked once more at the blue planet receding behind them. It appeared so harmless, so ordinary, a deception that had nearly cost them everything. The voice whispered once more in his mind before fading. "Tell them what you found here. Tell them what happens to those who threaten Earth." Vezik knew then that he was being allowed to escape, not out of mercy, but because the humans wanted him to deliver a message. They wanted the galaxy to know that Earth was not prey. Earth was the predator. The awakening. The eternal dawn emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Vazari space, its once pristine hull now scared and darkened. For 23 days, the ship had traveled through the void, carrying with it something far more dangerous than battle damage. High Admiral Kresh stood at the observation deck of Orbital Station Dominion, watching as the battered vessel approached. Behind him, a delegation of Imperial scientists, military strategists, and political advisors waited in anxious silence. A single ship, Kresh noted, his voice carrying the weight of his 3 centuries of service. One survivor from an invasion fleet of 20 vessels. Perhaps the humans were more technologically advanced than our intelligence suggested, offered political advisor Merrick, her slender frame dwarfed by the military officers surrounding her. Kresh turned, all 4 of his eyes narrowing. The Eternal Dawn carries a crew of 1,500. According to the distress signal, fewer than 300 remain alive. Many are experiencing severe neurological symptoms. This was no conventional defeat. The station's medical bay had been prepared for the survivors, though none of the doctors knew exactly what to expect. The reports from the crippled flagship had been fragmented, filled with terms that made little sense: psychic intrusion, reality manipulation, cognitive infection. "The ship has docked," announced a communications officer. "Medical teams are boarding now." The survivors came in waves. First, the physically wounded, those injured during the ship's desperate escape or in the madness that followed. Then came those whose wounds weren't visible, officers staring blankly at nothing, engineers muttering calculations to invisible listeners, soldiers whose combat reflexes have been rewired into something unpredictable and dangerous. Fleet Commander Vezik was the last to leave his ship. He walked with the assistance of 2 medical officers, his once commanding presence diminished. His crest hung limp, a sign of extreme exhaustion or illness among his kind. Kresh met him in a secure debriefing chamber. "Commander, the Empire requires your report." Vezik looked up, and Kresh nearly stepped back. The commander's eyes held something he had never seen in a Vazari warrior, a fundamental uncertainty, as if the very foundations of his understanding had been shattered. "They were waiting for us," Vezik said, his voice hoarse. "They knew we would come eventually. The humans, our intelligence indicated a pre-interstellar species with minimal defensive capabilities." A sound escaped Vezik that might have been laughter in another context. Intelligence. Yes, that's what it was about. Not weapons, not ships, intelligence. Kresh signaled, and a medical officer administered a stabilizing agent to the commander. Vezik's posture improved slightly, his focus sharpening. "Tell me everything," Kresh ordered, "from the beginning." And so Vezik recounted the disaster, the approach to Earth, the inexplicable loss of ships, the strange vessels that had appeared, and the presence that had invaded their minds. As he spoke, Medical monitors recorded elevated stress patterns in his neural pathways, confirming that merely remembering the encounter caused physiological distress. They're different from anything we've encountered, Vesic concluded. They evolved inward, not outward. Their technology isn't built. It's thought into existence. Reality responds to their intentions. Kresh's expression remained impassive, though his crest had begun to flush with the deep purple of concern. You believe these claims, that humans have evolved psychic abilities capable of destroying our capital ships. I don't just believe it, Vesic replied. I experienced it. They're inside us now. Every survivor carries a piece of them. A marker. A message. The medical officer interjected. High Admiral, we've detected unusual neural activity in all survivors. Something has altered their synaptic patterns. We cannot determine if it's a disease, a form of technology, or something else. Kresh considered this information. The Vesari Empire had existed for millennia, expanding relentlessly through the galaxy. They had encountered and subjugated hundreds of species, each conquest adding to their collective strength. The concept of defeat was almost foreign to their culture. Quarantine all survivors, he ordered. Full isolation protocols. No communication with the general population. And Earth? Asked Merrick. Kresh turned to a tactical display showing the sector where Earth resided. We will send a proper response. Not 5 ships, not 20. We will send the Third Fleet, 200 vessels, our finest weapons, our most experienced commanders. We will show these humans the true might of the Vesari Empire. Vesic struggled to rise from his seat. No, you don't understand what we're dealing with. More ships won't make a difference. They don't fight like we do. They don't think like we do. They bleed like we do, Kresh replied coldly. Everything that lies can die. You're sending them to slaughter, Vesic insisted, desperation in his voice. And worse, you're giving the humans exactly what they want. More minds to touch, more ships to study, more of our technology to understand. But the decision had been made. Within days, the Third Fleet assembled near the jump point that would begin their journey to Earth. The massive armada represented the largest military force the Vesari had deployed in a century, equipped with weapons that could reduce planets to molten slag. What they didn't realize was that the battle had already begun. The first signs were subtle. Navigation officers reported strange dreams, vivid visions of Earth, though none had ever seen the planet. Engineers found themselves contemplating theoretical technologies that had never occurred to Vesari science. Communications specialists heard whispers in the static between transmissions. By the time the fleet reached the halfway point to Earth, the symptoms had become impossible to ignore. Crew members across multiple ships reported seeing human figures in empty corridors. Weapon systems spontaneously recalibrated to targets that didn't exist. Jump calculations contained impossible variables that somehow produced correct results. Admiral Zorn, commander of the Third Fleet, refused to acknowledge the spreading unease. Psychological warfare, he declared during a command briefing. The survivors of the Eternal Dawn have spread their fear like a contagion. We are Vesari. We do not succumb to primitive intimidation tactics. Then came the dreams, not isolated incidents, but shared visions that crossed the boundaries between ships. Thousands of crew members experienced the same sequence, standing on Earth, watching as humans evolve from primitive tool users to beings of pure thought and intention. The dreams always ended the same way, the humans turning to look directly at the dreamers, acknowledging their presence across the gulf of space. We see you coming. We have always seen you. 7 days from Earth, the first ship vanished. Not in battle, not near any planet or asteroid field, simply gone, along with its crew of 1,200, while traveling through secure Vesari space. 2 more disappeared the following day. Admiral Zorn convened an emergency council. We are under attack, he stated, his crest fully extended in alarm. Somehow they've reached across space to strike at us. Impossible, argued his second in command. No known technology cold. These humans don't use technology as we understand it, interrupted the fleet's chief scientist, who had been studying the medical reports from the Eternal Dawn survivors. They've transcended the boundary between mind and matter. The survivors weren't just traumatized, they were changed, carrying something back with them. A beacon. Zorn realized with dawning horror. The humans have been tracking us through the survivors' minds. Before they could process this revelation, the communication system activated without anyone touching the controls. On every screen across the fleet, a single human face appeared, calm, ordinary by any standard, yet somehow projecting an authority that silenced even the highest-ranking Vasari officers. "This is Dr. Ilara Chen of the Earth Defense Collective," the human said, speaking perfect Vasari without any translation device visible. "Your invasion force has been neutralized. Your current fleet has been compromised. We did not start this conflict, but we will end it." Admiral Zorn found his voice. "You speak to the military might of the Vasari Empire. We do not surrender to primitive threats." The human's expression didn't change. "This is not a negotiation or a threat. This is information you need to understand your situation. 300 years ago, humanity faced extinction from within. Our own technologies, our own conflicts pushing us to the brink. We evolved out of necessity, developing abilities your science would consider impossible. We withdrew from galactic affairs not out of weakness but to protect other species from what we had become, while we learned to control our capabilities." "And what exactly are these capabilities?" Zorn demanded, trying to trace the transmission's origin. "Your ships aren't disappearing, Admiral. They're being removed from your perception of reality. They continue to exist, but in a state your consciousness cannot access. Their crews are unharmed, merely relocated, a demonstration of restraint on our part." The implication stunned the Vasari command. If the human was telling the truth, they possessed power over the fundamental nature of existence itself. "Why contact us now?" asked Zorn, buying time as his tactical officers desperately tried to lock weapons on the transmission source. Dr. Chen smiled slightly. "Because you're still thinking of how to destroy us, even as I explain why you cannot. Your weapons are targeting empty space, Admiral. I'm not broadcasting from a location. I'm directly interfacing with your ship's systems, and to some extent, with your minds." As if to prove her point, every weapons system across the fleet simultaneously powered down. Not damaged, not hacked, simply responding to an intention that overrode physical controls. "Humanity is awakening to its place in the galaxy," Chen continued. "We've observed the Vasari Empire's expansion, your conquest of the Palladian worlds, your harvesting of the Molosian Collective, your genetic experiments on the Tarn. We've watched and learned, remaining hidden until we could determine whether coexistence was possible." "And your conclusion?" Zorn asked, aware that he was now participating in a moment that would reshape Vasari history. "We are still deciding. Your attack on Earth accelerated a process that would have taken decades. Now, representatives of humanity are traveling to each of your conquered worlds, making contact with species you've subjugated. We're offering them a choice." The implications were clear. The Vasari Empire, built on military dominance and technological superiority, was facing a power that operated outside the rules they understood. Not with superior firepower, but with the ability to rewrite reality itself. "What do you want from us?" Zorn finally asked, his imperial pride giving way to the pragmatism that had also been a cornerstone of Vasari expansion. "Recognition, respect for boundaries, and a fundamental shift in how you interact with other intelligent species. The age of empire through conquest is ending, Admiral Zorn. Not because we destroy you, but because we're changing the nature of what power means in this galaxy." The transmission ended, but its impact reverberated through the fleet. Minutes later, reports flooded in from across Vasari space, mysterious humans appearing simultaneously on dozens of worlds, making contact with subject species, demonstrating abilities that defied explanation. 3 days later, the first rebellions began, not with weapons, but with subject species simply ignoring Vasari authority, protected by human observers who could not be captured or killed. In the imperial palace on the Vasari homeworld, the emperor received the reports with growing dread. The empire had faced challenges before, had overcome seemingly impossible odds through superior force and determination. But how does one fight an enemy that doesn't engage on any recognizable battlefield? They're not conquerors, explained Vezek, now brought before the emperor himself as the only commander to have encountered humans and returned. They're catalysts. They don't want our worlds or our resources. They want to fundamentally change the rules of engagement for all species. And if we refuse this change, the emperor asked. Vezek's response was simple. Then we become irrelevant. They don't need to destroy us. They can simply relocate us from the board entirely. As the emperor contemplated this existential threat, reports arrived of the first human delegation approaching the palace, walking calmly through layers of security as if physical barriers had no meaning, coming to deliver personally their message of galactic transformation. The deadliest species in the galaxy had awakened, and they had done so not with superior firepower or overwhelming numbers, but with the power to reimagine reality itself. The Vasari Empire, for the first time in its long history, faced an opponent it could neither subjugate nor destroy, only adapt to or perish in the attempt. The age of psychic humanity had begun.